First of all, I would like to start by thanking the organizers for the opportunity to chair that panel. My name is Katarzyna Bilińska. I work at the University of Economics in Katowice. I'm a head of marketing management and tourism department, but I'm also interested very much in let's say, topics related to the topic of our conference. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to our session on energy justice and the global energy transition. The topic is very important because it shapes technologically low fairness and the future of sustainable development. And we have 5 presentations today, each offering an international perspective. And I would like to underline that every presenter has 15 minutes because there are also time limitations today. And I kindly ask you for time discipline. At the end, we'll open the floor for discussion. And now I warmly invite the first presenters to begin their presentation. And I know that everyone is here, all the presenters are here, so we can start according to the plan. The first topic of the presentation is Unpacking Islamic Finance and Energy Justice in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates, Complementary or Opposing Principles, and that will be presented by Halima and Hussein, Ph.D., representing University of Po, France. Are you ready? I can just give you the microphone. Yes, please, you can just hold it. Yes, or it will be more convenient to you. Yes.
Thank you.
So just because you know, it's my let's say such observation and comment that we are just let's say following the flexible attitude to time. Yes. Cultural, flexible attitude to time. It's for sure not linear. Yes, let's stay by that option. But let's say, I'm asking you very much for just time discipline. 15 minutes, they belong to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Halima Hussein. I'm a Ph.D. researcher at the University of Po in France. I'm originally from Kenya. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I did my LLB degree, my bachelor's degree in Kenya, and my master's degree in energy and natural resources law at Queen Mary, University of London in the UK. And my Ph.D. looks at energy trade and the injustices in energy trade. Today, however, I'm going to discuss about something completely different, challenging myself, and I'll be talking about Islamic finance and energy justice in these 3 countries, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates, and whether they are complementary or opposing principles. So my presentation structure is what I have just presented there. I will introduce the topic. I will then talk about Islamic finance briefly, and then I will do a brief literature review of this topic. I will then unpack the theory of my presentation, which is energy justice, and introducing a new theory, Islamic climate finance. I will then talk about the method I'm using to interrogate this subject, and thereafter I'll dive into my 3 case studies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Malaysia. I will provide brief findings and finally conclude. Okay, so we need to know the background and the context to this presentation. We're living in a world where we know that renewables need to increase from 3% to 31% by 2050. We need to decline fossil fuel consumption from the current 80% to 33% by 2050 in order to meet our international targets under the Paris Agreement. We also know that these current targets are also very insufficient. We need to cut our current greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030. Moreover, we have a huge funding gap. We have a 25 trillion funding gap as per the S&P Global. And we have a very recent report by the UN, UNEP, released the Adaptation Funding Gap 2025 very recently, and it found that we need 310 to 365 billion per year for developing countries by 2035. We also know that energy transition is largely driven by government policy and regulation, as opposed to the private sector. But the private sector is doing something. We know that we have multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and MDBs are engaging in climate financing. The World Bank Group actually delivered 44% of their entire total financing towards climate financing, which is laudable. However, it is not enough, which is why I'm talking about this subject. We need more money, we need more climate finance, and it may not necessarily be from the World Bank Group, so where else can we get these funds? We need to remind ourselves of our current economic order, current economic standing. We are largely driven by Adam Smith economics, whereby he said this, in his Wealth of Nations book in 1776, that we should actually be looking towards self-interest to engage people, that we should never talk to them about what is good, what is greater for the larger community. It should be their own advantages in order to attract these people. And today I'm going to introduce a new way of thinking that actually it should not be a profit-driven economy. It should not be specifically targeting individual interests for the common good. No, it should, at its base, be for the common good. And this is exactly what Islamic finance talks about. It focuses on profit, not interest. Interest is prohibited in Islamic finance. It focuses on risk sharing and profit and loss sharing. What Professor Heffron discussed earlier this morning, risk, reward, responsibility. It talks about sharing these responsibilities. It prohibits speculation, speculative transactions based on future, future events. It mandates that investments need to be ethical. You cannot invest in some industries that are prohibited, such as gambling and alcohol. It also talks about the prohibition of unjust enrichment, that there should be fairness and balance in your transactions that prevent one party unjustly enriching themselves against the interests of the other party. And that it also inherently does not believe that money has value. Money is a means of exchange, and that money has to be backed by an asset, and that is how you make profit, not purely through money. And it also mandates social responsibility and charity, what they call zakat, which is mandatory charity, 2.5% of annual wealth for those people who are eligible. And finally, that you need to be transparent and disclose everything in every single transaction that you undertake. So essentially, it's about justice and partnership, very familiar principles to us. And on the right is actually the first bank, Islamic Finance Bank. It was established in 1964 in Egypt. It closed down after 6 years. But not because it was not profitable. It was very publicly accepted. It was closed down due to the prevailing politics, and it was taken over by banks that were then supported by the government. So where is Islamic finance? Majority of Islamic finance is in Islamic banking, 70%. Sukuk, we have about 18% in sukuk. Sukuk means bonds. We have Islamic funds, which are mutual funds, 6%. We have other funds, 4%, and we have takaful, which is actually their insurance, the Islamic version of insurance, 2%. So what are people saying about Islamic finance and climate finance? And this is exactly the emerging literature that I have discovered. Most of it is very recent. So the first is this initiative, Islamic Sustainable Finance Initiative 2025. It emanated from this pledge by the UAE Banks Federations of 1 trillion dirham by 2030. And we have very innovative, we have private sector, we have regulators, and we also have civil society in this initiative, which is laudable. The other literature discusses, and we have a lot of policy papers from the UN primarily. We also have OECD providing policy papers on how we can actually channel Islamic finance into SDGs and climate action, reminding Islamic finance rich countries that actually of 1.7 billion people, 21% actually live below the poverty line, double the worldwide figure. Why isn't it going towards helping these people that are part of that community? And the third emerging literature is a lot of work is going into sukuk, the green bonds, the 18% that I actually identified earlier, and we have the London Stock Exchange, the International Capital Market Association, Islamic Development Bank, and we also have a lot of think tanks, McKinsey is in it, PwC.
5 minutes.
Quite in case,
yes.
Okay. And we also have very new literature that has been published on this topic this month and one coming up next month. So energy justice and Islamic finance. The Asian Development Bank came up with this, trying to bring in, how does Islamic finance and Islamic principles marry together with our current climate crisis? And if you look at the principles and what we're talking about in energy justice, they're literally the same. We're talking about justice, equity, fairness, accountability, vicegerency or environmental stewardship, compassion for people. These are the very principles that we talk about in energy justice. In terms of the method, I used the doctrinal and case study method. If you look at the top countries that have the most Islamic finance assets, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, UAE, I picked the top 4. Unfortunately, I could not find data from Iran, so I picked the top 3, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and UAE. In terms of Saudi Arabia, I'll just speak about this. A lot of strategy, a lot of policy on what they intend to do with respect to renewables, with respect to cutting down emissions, even coming up with very large solar power projects. But there's a very big gap between their ambition and their implementation. Actually, 2% is renewables. That they do, besides consuming a lot of fossil fuels, they also export a lot of fossil fuels, leading to a lot of cosmopolitan injustices, distributive injustices. So they have a lot of Islamic finance, they have a lot of supposed climate finance and climate strategies, but their actions and what they're talking about and what they have does not marry with each other. If you look at the climate, if you look at the latest climate action tracker, their standing is critically insufficient. United Arab Emirates, if you look at their strategy, very big on sukuk, very big on bonds. They're the leaders in this field, essentially. But when you look at what they're actually doing, look, just 2 years ago, they awarded contracts worth 17 billion for their offshore gas fields. What they're saying and what is actually, what is happening does not marry with each other. Despite all those assets, I mentioned 70% in Islamic banking, look at what they're focusing on, 16%. It doesn't make sense. Their narrative and what is happening on the ground, does not marry with climate. Islamic climate finance does not marry with energy justice. Finally, Malaysia, very big on forest governance, dishing out carbon credits left, right, and center. 50% of Malaysia is essentially forest, which is very laudable. But if you look at what they're doing, also focusing a lot on carbon credits, on sukuk, on bonds, but very reliant on fossil fuels, does not marry with energy justice as well as Islamic climate finance, where they are a leader. So essentially, it's about implementation, not new pledges. We need to implement what we are saying. That's what Islamic climate finance is about. We need to disseminate this knowledge. Zakat, which is charity, is mandatory according to these principles. 2.5% of annual wealth every year. Where is it going? There's already public acceptance of donation, of common goodwill. Why aren't we doing that? And targeted action. Why are we talking about sukuk, mutual funds, assets, takaful, instead of the 70% in Islamic banking? Why aren't we focusing on that? And for the rest of the world, it's focused a lot in the GCC region, Gulf Arab states, but Europe is taking up, the UK is doing a lot on these. I mean, the rest of Europe can pick up and take these lessons and run with it. To conclude, they're not opposing principles. They're actually they go well together, and we should be speaking about this. We need to direct these funds away from fossil fuels. It's about telling these countries, reminding them, even in a friendly way, this is what you're talking about. Why aren't you doing it? And finally, it's more than a financial opportunity. It's an ethical, social. We have ethical, social imperatives through Islamic climate finance to boost up climate finance that we need. I'll conclude there. My latest research is one that we wrote with my supervisor, Professor Heffron, as well as Diane Krall from Australia. You can have a look at it. It's about energy policy distractions, some of the distractions I might have mentioned today, to renewable energy programs, a comparative assessment, and to upcoming literature in energy policy journal, as well as a book chapter. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's really very interesting topic. And I think that at the end of the session, we could also discuss and ask questions. But now we come to the next presentation, and that's the presentation under the title Control of Standard Terms in Energy Performance Contracts. And the presenter is Emine Meliknur Kiliç from İzmir Berrezai University, Turkey. Yes? So, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr.
You can start, and don't forget you have 15 minutes.
Yeah, of course. Okay, my name is Emine Meliknur Kiliç.
Wait a moment.
I'm sorry.
Yes, because we have also our online guests, yes?
Yeah, but can we please wait a bit? Okay. I'm not fond of that.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Hello.
Speak to the microphone.
Okay. I'm Emine Meliknur Kiliç. I had my LLB degree, bachelor degree and LLM degree at Istanbul Bilgi University, and having my Ph.D. degree at 9 Eylül University. Now I'm a research assistant at İzmir Berrezai University. So, but this is not the one. This is the last year's. It's a break, right? It's not in 15 minutes. So...
It's not the correct presentation,
No, it's
yes?
not.
So, another PPT.
But I can keep talking. Thanks to the organizing team and the scientific committees for such as amazing conference. And
continue, please.
Okay.
Yes.
My outcomes occurs from my visit to LMU Munich during my predoctoral research. So I would like to thank to Professor Stefan Lorenz and the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey, TÜBİTAK, which give me the scholarship for that research.
Okay, I think that now is the right one, yes?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yes. We know that it's very human to make mistakes, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So please continue,
thank
and
you.
don't be so nervous, yes? We
yeah,
are
I'm
supporting you
okay.
very much.
Yeah,
I think
thank
the
you.
topic is interesting, and we are listening to you carefully.
Yeah, the context and the aim. Energy performance contracts are widely used in public and private sectors to promote energy efficiency and renewable energy generation. These contracts are usually long-term, technically complex, and involve substantial investment. Because they are drafted by specialized companies, they often appear as standard form contracts. So they live in one party, often the client or employer with limited bargain power. The aim of this study to examine whether certain standard EPC clauses comply with fairness standards in Turkish law by utilizing German legal practice. So, what is an... Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have a presidential degree, dated, which is important, but I have no time to talk about it. And what is an energy performance contract? In EPCs, the contractor guarantees measurable energy saving. The client pays based on performance. Legally, it's a hybrid work of service and work contracts. The problem, however, is that the EPCs are almost always based on standard documents, so the clauses are not negotiated, and the client's ability or knowledge is minimal. Thus, the influence of the client or employer is also minimal, often none. And what is standard contract terms? They are pre-drafted and not individually negotiated. Control of the standard contract terms aims to protect contractual balance, ensure transparency, and prevent the misuse of contractual freedom in situation of unequal bargain power. And the three stages of the control according to Turkish law: validity control, which usually checks if the other party was properly informed and consented to the terms. Interpretation control, it's a principle comes from Roman law, so Turkish law based on Roman law. Uncertainties are read against the drafter to protect the weaker party. And content control, which is my favorite, based on good faith, ensures the clauses don't create unfair imbalance. And the Turkish law, also many of the European law, follows the German model because of the AG-BGG. German model, but its protective scope is wider because we have less codification. But narrower for legal practice because we are still trying to figure it out. And there would be many cases if the articles would use properly. Especially in B2B contracts, we have still problems in Turkey. So comparison to German law, I will cut it short. Key difference in short. In Turkish law, consumer contracts receive separate security while other contracts fall under the code of obligation. Yet in practice, courts often overemphasize the prudent merchant principle that limiting the protection of merchants and narrowing the content control, especially B2B contracts. So, what is the prudent merchant? We are seeing a Polish merchant. So, it's a principle which is in the Turkish Code of Commercial. Prudent merchant is the most rational one, while every act of his. So the Supreme Court often limits the standard term control between merchants on this basis. And the courts, how we solve this problem, the court should examine each specific case individually rather than making assumption on knowingly acting or merchant. Even if the employer or client is a merchant, EPCs may not be within their field of work, or maybe they are unfamiliar with these contract clauses. So every case should be checked by every scenario checked by case. Yeah. And let's come some case examples. First of all, you see there's TEDAŞ. TEDAŞ refers Turkish Electricity Distribution Company. In our case, it is the third-party administrative approval office. And this article regulates defects notification, warranty, and delivery of the contractor. So this is an important article, that's why. Here the warranty starts before TEDAŞ official acceptance, so the client cannot start to use the work even it's delivered by the contractor. This is a problem for the employer. So here's the conflict of interest occurs. Contractor, in that article, contractor might want to make the delivery to avoid the risk of damages, loss due to a delay caused by third party, the administrative office. And employer's interest here is early start of result of delivery. We are talking about period of time, such as defects notification and warranty. So, but there is no actual delivery. So, what is our proposal to make this article, make this term became more fair for both parties? This clause offers a balanced provision. And I should have said that, sorry, there's an BGH decision about this article, this scenario. So it says that if you make it start, it should be seeable for the employer, so it would be fair for both parties. So for the basis of BGH decision, this is the most balanced provision. It ties the warranty period to actual acceptance, preventing unfair shortening. At the same time, it protects the contractor from indefinite delays by requiring the employer to complete acceptance within a reasonable time. Here I accepted 30 days after a written request. Since the delay is neither because of the contractor nor the employer, it's the third party's issue. After a written notification of the contractor, if not, hasn't made it by the third party, the warranty starts automatically. Thus, the clause ensures predictability, fairness, and the good faith, keeping EPC both enforceable and practical for the parties. And let's check the second example.
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's enough. This clause on maintenance lack of transparency. It makes the employee pay from the third year onward, but refers unclearly to another document. Since it leaves price and scope undefined, it gives the contractor unilateral power. But we don't want unilateral power for the contracts. Such wording would breach Article 25. Turkish Code of Obligation, and fairness and transparency, and violates provision of the unilateral chains. Here you can see the codes from both Turkish law and the BGB. In EPC contracts, where maintenance is a major long-term expense, so this is a lack of clarity unfairly shifts the risk to the employer. And there's also creates a conflict of interest. What is our proposal? Here, reserved maintenance clause meet the control standards. So it links fee updates to objective parameters, ensuring transparency and predictability. It clearly defines the scope of service and prevent unnecessary changes to the annex, thus to achieve fairness, balance, and legal compliance while keeping EPC efficient and practical. Key findings, I have mentioned them many times, so I will keep them. I will keep to the conclusion. Come to the conclusion. To conclude, standard terms control is not just a consumer tool, but a means to ensure transparency, predictability, and trust in long-term contracts, ensuring competition among market actors, because it's a matter of preventing unfair competition. The fairness of EPCs depends on effective control. However, Turkey's prudent merchant approach remains too rigid, quite rigid, and defines perfect conditions which is quite distant from real ones. So standard contract terms control would strengthen EPC market credibility and balance efficiency with fairness in the renewable energy era. It would be better Turkish courts to strengthen an approach that align with commercial practice and safeguards good faith and unfair competition in merchant relations. So, yeah, thank you for listening me. Okay. If any questions.
Thank you very much. I know it's very hard just to present so complicated problems in such quiet time. Yeah. But thank you for the time discipline. It was really multi-dimensional, presentation. And now we can come to the next presenter, and that's the title of the presentation: Just Transition and the Safety of Offshore Wind Energy Workers in the United Kingdom. And the presenter is Eddy Wiffa, yes, is that correct?
Yes.
From University of Aberdeen, United Kingdom. So the floor is yours, please start, and don't forget 15 minutes, yes? I know it's not nice of me, but I have no another possibility because, yes, I think we are all thinking of dinner a little bit, or not?
So, hello everyone. I'll do you all a favor, and I'll speak in 10 minutes. And that's because you've been generous enough to stay here till this moment. I wasn't expecting to have anyone in the room. And I'll take it away from the conventional academic conference presentations and talk about this like we are taking a walk, right? The talk is on the safety of offshore wind workers. And as we have these conversations around the energy transition and just transition, the big question is, who are those at the heart of the transition? Who are those at the heart of getting us to net zero? It's not the companies. It's not necessarily the government. It is the workers, your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your friends. They will be the ones saddled with the responsibility of going offshore to build gigantic offshore wind farms, hundreds and thousands of them, sometimes under very, very stringent and challenging weather conditions. That will be their job. Let's start with the story of Ronnie Alexander. Ronnie was a 74-year-old security guard working in a remote location of an onshore wind farm. And he set out to work on this particular day, and, the weather turned really bad. It snowed, and he started freezing. He checked his working communication device. It had failed. He checked again. There was no backup. The heating in his cabin had failed. The generator also failed. So he tried to walk to see if he could, get out and get some help. He fell a few miles after and froze to death. Now, his family was paid 6 figures, about 800 and something thousand pounds, just under 900,000. But the words from his wife and his daughters really struck me, and they said they hope that the death of Ronnie provides a lesson for the industry. So as we begin to say so much about energy transition, and we look at the energy quadrilemma, and I know a lot of people have talked about the energy dilemma, the energy trilemma, and the energy quadrilemma, which is the 4th element of social acceptability. And that is where offshore wind workers sit within the context of the just transition. And it's that fundamental question that, is it fair that the people who are set with the task of getting us to net zero are doing it under the most unsafe conditions? And that unfortunately, particularly in the UK, the law, the regime under which they are meant to build those wind turbines are not fit for purpose. It is not in doubt that offshore wind is going to grow. It's growing exponentially. I mean, I remember the words of one of the UK prime ministers saying offshore wind is going to be to the UK what oil is to Saudi Arabia. So that's to give you a bit of a context of how far they're going. But as the industry grows, they need workers. Right now, as I speak, we have about 30,000 workers. The expectation is to get to 100,000 by 2030. Put that into context. If all these years we only have 30,000, and we need to ramp up productions, again, climate change is a reality. It means we need 70,000 workers in the next 6 to 7 years. That gives you a sense of the drive that would be happening in the next few years in order to recruit workers. What happens when, as a result of that speed to recruit so fast, you end up recruiting unskilled labor? It means it's very likely they wouldn't have the training that is required to work under those sort of conditions. What about the technology? If we look at a time, we would see very clearly that the technology is getting bigger, right? We're dealing with smaller offshore wind farms, but now we're dealing with heights of over 250. We're dealing with blades that are over, heights of over 150 and blades that are over 250. That's way longer than your Boeing 737. And all these things need to be transported. So as a result of that push, we're seeing a number of challenges, and these are all reported. So I have a number of publications, over 20,000 words of publication on this, and there would be a monograph about 80,000 next year. So if you want to read a bit more about this, definitely data is out there. But we are beginning to see that there's a lot of skills gap, and most of the incidents as we are seeing and experiencing is as a result of people not with sufficient skills. And that's because they've pulled people from other industries like tourism and marine industry more broadly to work in offshore wind. There's a poor safety culture overall. And these are some of the warnings from the industry, right? These are people within the industry, the environmental health and safety manager for Equinor. And so if these people are saying something, then we should take them seriously. And if you read the quote, it's saying a number of serious incidents have been happening, and there is a poor safety culture. The other quote by Andrew Linnington, which is really the workforce, is saying that workers who apply high safety standards are losing out to companies that are cutting corners. So we're seeing that as we ramp up production and growth of the offshore wind energy industry, not just in the UK, but globally, a lot of companies are cutting corners. Because when there's a tension between safety and cost, then safety takes the back seat. So this is a really fundamental issue. So I stumbled on one of the letters from one of the regulators writing to the companies saying a lot of serious incidents have been happening and they are concerned that things will get worse. And that's just after COVID in 2020. So these are really recent events that are beginning to raise concerns. And what has happened? What really happened and made this situation go from bad to worse is because when the UK was moving offshore, And as we say, lawyers come in when problems, only when there's a problem. Everybody keeps on doing business as usual and everybody's happy once you're making money. But once the liabilities start coming in, you start looking for your lawyer. So what happened was, back in 2003, when the UK was looking to go offshore, the question was, do we have regulations for offshore safety? No, we don't. Do we have regulations for onshore safety? Yes, we do. You know what? Could we make a law that transposes all the onshore regulations and put them offshore? Yes, we can. So basically, the UK passed what we call the Application Outside Great Britain Order and basically moved onshore laws and made them apply offshore. Once you begin to look at the risk profile, it becomes very clear that the risk between onshore and offshore is significantly different. That was the fundamental mistake. 25 years after, we are warning that that was a fundamental mistake upon which the industry is significantly struggling. Current data now tells us that offshore wind health and safety incidents are 3 to 4 times higher in offshore wind than in offshore oil and gas. So the argument is, if the offshore oil and gas industry regulations are so advanced, and as we've proven that through research, why haven't we adopted what we now know as the safety case regulation in offshore wind? We've had these interactions, and the concern has just been that they don't have the resource. So there's a sense of denial that offshore wind is not as dangerous, and so we should not bother. But even if we were to even bother, the resources don't exist. Now, the presentation is really not to tell you all the whole story, and hopefully you get to read some of the research and be part of the work we're doing, but it's essentially to say this is becoming a really serious problem, that as much as we look at the transition, let's not ignore some of those benign issues around the safety of the workers, and that the lessons are there. And while we apply them to offshore wind, you could equally be as proactive to apply them even to the mining of critical minerals, because we have our loved ones and family members that are saddled with that responsibility to get us to net zero. The question is, who will bear the price? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for presentation and for time discipline. And now we are coming to our online presenters. And we have 2 presentations. That's Fanny Berrezai. And we have the presentation under the title European and National Laws on Offshore Windmills. Yes. European Federation of Energy Law Association from Luxembourg. Yes. So, are you ready to present? Can you share your screen with us?
I will try.
Okay. We're waiting. Okay, everything is working.
Everything is working?
Okay,
Right.
15 minutes for you.
So, I launched it. Okay, thank you. Sorry, just a second. Can you hear me?
Perfectly fine.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, well, thank you for having me, and I am so glad that the previous presentation was about safety of offshore wind workers, since I am now going to talk to you about the role and regulation of offshore wind energy in Europe's energy sovereignty and climate action. When I'm talking about Europe, I'm in European Union. So, in a context marked by the energy transition, the increasing digitalization of economies, and geopolitical uncertainties, demand for electricity continues to rise. In the first quarter of 2025, the EU consumed 1,313 terawatt-hours of electricity, which is a 2.2% increase compared to 2024. 5 out of the first 6 months of 2025 saw higher demand than the same months last year. Concomitantly with this rising demand, the EU must decarbonize its industry. And if the EU is a global leader of decarbonization, thanks in particular to its European Green Deal and European climate law, yet it is a net importer of energy supply and critical mineral, and was until recently dependent on Russia in this regard. The energy crisis following Russia's invasion of Ukraine has underscored the risk stemming from over-reliance on a dominant foreign fossil fuel supplier, and has demonstrated the importance of wind and renewable energy sources. The EU must gain today its energy independence, and offshore wind energy is one of the many leverages and most important ones. The EU currently has the largest maritime area in the world and is uniquely positioned to develop offshore renewable energy thanks to the diversity and complementarity of its 5 sea basins. The EU now aims to reach 60 gigawatts of installed offshore wind capacity by 2030. But today there is only 21 gigawatts. Only 1 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity that are already operational. The Global Offshore Wind Alliance estimates that globally 22 countries, including 15 in Europe, have already set offshore wind power targets for 2030. This could increase global production capacity from the current 83 gigawatts to 263 gigawatts in the best case scenario. To put this into perspective, 1 gigawatt roughly corresponds to the electricity consumption of about 1 million households. So offshore wind could thus help supply decarbonized electricity to up to 263 million households worldwide. The EU, to achieve the different targets that have already been set, so to 2030 target, 2040 hypothetical 2040 target, and 2050 climate neutrality target, well, the EU designs therefore a comprehensive regulation framework to foster the decarbonization of its industry. In 2025, the Commission's EU-wide assessment of the national energy and climate plans shows that the EU is currently on course to reduce net GHG emissions by around 54% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels, but only if member states implement fully existing and planned national measures and EU policies. Results of the EU policies decarbonization-wise start to show. While the cost of wind power has dramatically reduced over the past decade, wind power in the EU has increasingly contributed to the electricity generation. Wind power started, for example, the summer 2025 very strongly, with the highest ever generation for the months of May and June. To fully grasp the dynamics at play, it is essential to first examine the key difficulties encountered in the policy's rollout. Following this, we will explore the solutions proposed by the European Union and its members to address these obstacles before examining the current applicable regulatory framework governing offshore wind development in the EU, which has been designed to tackle the aforementioned difficulties. So, first of all, what difficulties does the offshore wind energy policy implementation face? Well, Europe has bold ambitions for offshore wind. In many ways, it is ideally suited. There is an abundance of shallow sea available with very good wind resources, particularly in the North and Baltic seas, and Europe has long been the global leader in offshore wind development. But the time needed to establish political framework for offshore wind, upgrade electricity grids to connect projects, and develop local supply chains makes the development of the European offshore wind industry a significant challenge. Experts today have identified many of them, such as an excessive permitting and administrative delays, because while offshore wind farms take generally longer to build than onshore projects due to their bigger size. In addition, permitting processes remain slow in most EU countries, except Germany. Mainly, but not restricted to, due to poor implementation of EU rules. According to the EU Commission, obtaining a permit can take up to 9 years for wind projects, whether onshore or offshore. A second problem is related to workforce and skill gaps, which was mentioned in the previous presentation, because there is a shortage of skilled labor. An estimated 100,000 additional jobs will be needed in the wind sector by 2030. But the EU lacks organized training programs for skilled workers, so this is a problem. A third problem would regard the supply chain and raw material constraints. There is an uncertain demand for wind turbines within the EU. There is a dependence on raw material imports because Europe relies on third countries, especially China, for critical materials. And there is a price volatility and inflation, which further complicate supply chain stability. A fourth problem regards auction design and market issues. Poorly designed national auctions in several countries lead to unreliable or absent planning and to important delays. This lack of visibility on schedules and flow support discourages investments. Hence, there are insufficient bidders responding to tenders and increasing project risks. Furthermore, national auctions often do not appropriately reward the high environmental and social standards of union products, as many auctions are based solely or mainly on, mostly on price. Also, auction design options differ strongly across member states, which increases transactions costs for economic operators, and therefore further harmonization of member states' auction design would be advisable. A fifth problem identified is maritime infrastructure and logistical bottlenecks. There are grid bottlenecks. Restriction in grid capacity hinder the integration of new wind energy projects for facts. Port capacity is not expanding quickly enough to meet demand, and shortage of installation vessels create delays in project executions. The last issue identified regards competition and spatial conflicts, because increased pressure from international competitors is important, and conflicts with local fishermen over maritime space allocation are an issue too. Restrictions in grid capacity, port capacity, vessel availability, a slower pace of electrification, and ongoing permitting issues and poorly designed auctions in several countries result in the fact that offshore wind energy is expanding less quickly than governments want. But what solutions are brought by the EU and member states, actually? Well, the responses to these challenges today are not only legislative, but rather structural and technical. They require greater coordination between member states and markets, and at the European level, the Commission has deployed a toolbox in recent years, composed mainly of the following key elements: Wind Action, Energy Action Plan, RED III Directive, the NZIA regulation, and the Clean Industrial-Based State Aid Framework, all designed to address the obstacle encountered. The European Union aims to structure its response through 6 main pillars, which are on the screen. So the first one is about acceleration of deployment through increased...
There are 5 minutes left.
Well, I'm doing my best, but first point. And second one is improved auction design. 3, access to finance. 4, creating a fair and competitive international environment. 5th, skills, and 6th, an industry engagement and member states' commitments. But specifically for offshore wind, the European Commission seeks to also ensure integrating maritime spatial planning, strengthen the resilience of infrastructure, support research and innovation, and then develop supply chain and skills. Consequently, the EU has established a regulatory framework in recent years. What are the details of this framework? Is it completed? And finally, is it efficient? So, the energy policy must observe at all times precautionary principle, which is in the TFEU, and the energy policy is a shared competence between the EU member states and the EU, which means that the EU and member states are able to legislate and adopt legally binding acts, but member states only exercise their own competence where the EU does not. Today, the framework is fairly fragmented. We will see that there are half of them which are binding and half of them which are non-binding. So it started in 2014 with a directive on maritime spatial planning. Then later on, in 2018, the second directive on the promotion of the use of energy from renewable sources, which will be revised later in the time. In 2020, the EU strategy to harness the potential of offshore renewable energy for a climate-neutral future has been issued. 2021, we have a first regulation establishing a technical support instrument, which allows the acceleration of the granting of permits in the wind energy sectors And 6 member states have already benefited from this instrument to support acceleration. In 2022, the EU has revised the Trans-European Energy Networks rules. In 2022, so same year of December, another regulation has arrived, which was very important because it was actually an emergency regulation on permitting procedures, which simplified and shortened this procedure for renewable energies, including repowering and grids. And this regulation was initially valid for only 18 months, but was extended until the 30th of June 2025. So today it's not applicable, but it has been extended. In 2023, then, the EU revised maritime security strategy was issued. Same year, later on in the year of 2023, the revised Renewable Energy Directive RED III arrived. And this renewable energy is very important because it is actually the EU's primary permanent instrument for promoting renewable energy. There are differences between the RED II and RED III directive regarding targets. So 32% of the EU's gross final energy consumption should come from renewables by 2030 if we stand with RED II directive. The RED III directive sets a minimum of 42.5%.
Sorry for disturbing, but we really don't have a lot of time. So please just come to conclusions because, yes, I know that there are many details. Maybe something that you think is most important as the conclusion. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Could you just sum up?
I try to. Okay, so in 2023 and 2024 and 2025, all the major regulations have been issued by the EU. In conclusion, just a little thing too. There are still some regulations to come. So this year, December 3 and December 10, we will have 3 major texts who will be issued by the European Commission. And at the same time, all those regulations have to be to deal with European other directives, environmental one on roads, habitats, and water. In conclusion, where the EU does not plan any additional binding text, and because the energy policy is a shared competency, governments of member states must also prioritize the electrification of industry, etc., etc. Overall, at a time when the industry is facing cost inflation, supply chain pressures and permitting delays without clear targets, investment slows, supply chains lose momentum, and countries risk falling behind in the global race towards clean, secure, and affordable energy. As we mentioned in our introduction, the first important and positive results have shown this year, but there is still a long way to go to achieve the EU decarbonization targets, and industry actors keep bringing up the difficulties we listed earlier. Direct effects from the implementation of the EU toolbox will only start to show in a few years. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for presentation, and sorry for disturbing, but really we have not enough time. I know that the problems are very complicated, and actually each presenter should have a lot, much more time, but sorry, don't have it. So now we come to the last presentation, and that's the presentation under the title Nuclear Energy, Part of the Just Transition in the Western Balkans or Not. And the presenter is Strahinja Obrenović from Serbia, yes, University of Belgrade. Are you ready for presenting?
Yes, thank you very much.
So don't forget that you are given 15 minutes, okay? Thank you very much in advance.
I just want to share a PowerPoint presentation.
I think that below you can find the arrow, yes? Showing that it should be shared, the screen, yes?
I think now you will be able to see the presentation.
We can see the presentation.
Thank you very much. First, we are talking about the region in the Europe that is currently outside the European Union. As you can see on this slide, there is a different kind of energy mix which is used to produce the electricity in both EU and the Western Balkans. Currently, we are talking about the region that is highly dependent on the coal generation. So we have coal reserves, and there is a tradition of producing electricity mainly from the coal. The exception is the Albania as only country which is relying on hydropower. So almost completely, it's over-dependent on hydropower. Even we are talking about the renewable energy, something that is in line with the decarbonization goals. One of the criticism regarding the Albanian energy source is that it is highly dependent and dependable of the weather conditions generating hydropower. So the major issue, as you can see here, there is a kind of black hole, and we are talking about the region that is suffering from those consequences coming not only from the coal, but dominantly in the production sector, so to generate the electricity, and also in other sectors that are closely related with the energy sector. And as you can see, a lot of our power plants from this region and even other countries, for example, Ukraine and Turkey, that are closely related with the events around the EU, as some of the candidates countries to join this organization are also suffering the same problem or are facing the same problem. So are we prepared for the just energy transition? When we are talking about this region, it's highly dependent on the policy setting that is happening inside the EU. Although I mentioned once again, we are talking about the countries that are still in the negotiation process with Brussels to join this organization. And we have this pledge that is political, Sofia Declaration, so it's capital of Bulgaria, where the leaders of the Western Balkans joined with the EU counterparts in this city and pledged to do the same thing and mirror what was previously included in the EU Green Deal. One of the main organizations present here in our region is the Energy Community, which is actually adopting all of these rules, EU rules, and the aim is to extend the internal energy market. So how to integrate all of these countries in this segment of the energy transition. And on the same path, all of the countries in the regions are obliged to adopt national energy and climate plans. So in those national energy and climate plans, they actually set the targets for the decarbonization and all of the measures, how to achieve it. And of course, one of the issues which will come into the force by full in 2026 is the CBAM, or Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which will influence all of the happenings even in this region, especially when we are talking about the electricity export from those countries to the EU, which, once again, I mentioned, are highly dependent on the coal generation. And now we are approaching the nuclear topic in the region, and we can see a clear division. There is no consensus even inside the EU when it comes to the nuclear energy as a source of their energy mix or their energy source in the whole energy structure. So we have currently 12 EU member states, so something below the half of all EU member states with nuclear reactors. But some of the events, especially in recent 2 or 3 years, are witnessing in favor of the nuclear energy, although there is still no consensus on this issue. One of the most important thing, I think, is the judgment in the case, as you can see, Austria versus Commission from the September this year, which actually court adopted that position that we can put nuclear energy and gas as a transition energy sources, which is in long term compatible with the decarbonization aims. Are we talking about the nuclear energy momentum in the region? We can say so, because in the public sphere and in debates, politicians and leaders in our regions are setting this topic. This is especially case for Serbia and North Macedonia. I'm coming from Serbia, and we have talked about the nuclear energy around 2021. Since that time, we have that in the public discourse. We can recall the 2021 with the high energy prices, which started by some of the political and market events. We have those Gazprom strategy on the gas market, and of course we have those events that are not closely related with the political events, which are characterized as a perfect storm. We have underperformance of some renewable energy sources. We actually have the nuclear or the whole energy sector is becoming with all of issue of aging infrastructure and so on the European continent. And finally, the year 2022, with the Russian attack on Ukraine, we have more impetus or push for the nuclear energy on the whole European continent. When we are talking about, once again, the region of the Western Balkan, we have this Chernobyl legacy after the nuclear catastrophe in that time Soviet Union. And as an answer on that event, we have nuclear moratorium or nuclear ban for the development of nuclear power plants, even for civil purposes using nuclear energy was forbidden. But we can see on this map that during that time, some of the neighboring countries, even on the eastern part of the political bloc in that time, during the Cold War era, for example, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary as well, and other countries developed their nuclear capacities. And this is the setting even for this moment. We have this legacy and we have some of the current issues which are connecting on these days. So when we are talking about whether the nuclear energy is a part of the just transition in the Western Balkans, we can hear different arguments. We have this different kind of conceptual differences between centralized and decentralized energy system. For the most time, we were dependent on the centralized energy system, but more and more in recent time, we are moving toward the centralized energy system, which is characterized by the democratization of the energy sector, especially with the penetration of renewable energy like solar and wind projects. Now, when we have those discussions about the phase out of the coal, which is the still backbone of the energy industry in the Western Balkan, what will serve as a baseload power in the coming years? So whether nuclear energy can step in to be baseload power, we will see. Also, different kinds of energy justice tenets are related with those energy transition efforts in the Western Balkans, especially having in mind the fact that the coal sector and coal mining sector are still employing a large part of populations here in the region. So it will be specifically relevant to implement just transition policies, which will address those issues. Of course, we can witness the geopolitics of energy, even on the field of nuclear discussion. For example, the most obvious example is Serbia, which is the leader nowadays in the region when it's coming to the discussion about the potential of nuclear energy. And we can see the interest not only from the Western actors and their Western companies, but there are also interests from other countries. For example, Russian company Rosatom is very interested to invest. This is not only case for Serbia, but we know the project in Hungary, Paks-2. We also have issue around that project in Hungary because of the state aid rules. I won't go into the details regarding that case. And also we have China. We have some of the Asian companies from other countries such as South Korea and Japan, and etc. And I think just to point out or highlight one more bullet point for discussion is the issue of transparency and accountability, which is the major issue nowadays in those countries. We are still talking about the countries which didn't consolidate democratic institutions. We are still struggling with the economic indicators because we are underperforming the EU average development. So if we are considering nuclear option, it is necessary to establish those institutions, and it will be a really financial burden on those countries to develop those projects. So one of the answer is to strengthen the institutions and enforce the regional cooperation. And that is for this part. I will leave more points for the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for very interesting presentation. And I think that we had the great opportunity just to touch a little bit different topics regarding the energy transformation in the world. But due to delay of our sessions, I suggest just moving all the discussions and Q&A sessions to the Monopole Hotel, where we will meet and having our together dinner. So let's meet us in the hotel at 8 p.m. Thank you very much. And my also suggestion is just maybe to take a picture, together picture as the result of our together session. Yes. So maybe we could just stay here and maybe we will ask for the picture. Okay. All the panelists and maybe the guests as well. Thank you very much for your attention. That's over, yes, for today.